The role of the matter for this debate is the team that best interrogates the subject in the ways in which it relates to object to an argument is that subject to or the ability to gain the kinship structure or to have an identity practice that can be evaluated through a political and sociological perspective is one that is empowered through the wanting CI, their ability to say that they have a form of re-empowerment. Her as an Asian American, as a Japanese American, and him as a Filipino American. Argument is that those things are still created in counter distinction to objective. Therefore, you cannot articulate yourself or meditate upon objectivity of very social conditions that created that subject to begin with. That is our first piece of direct text and evidence. It goes consider that makes an argument for why you might be an oppressed body, you might be a colonized body for that matter. You may lose your motherland. You may, as Joe LeDuc said, it's very difficult to explain it. It's not a yes or no question. Rather, it's the process of assimilation and the process of violence that occurred in the Philippines, or what Kaplan calls the white man's burden. But those things are intrinsic to you losing your motherland. While we lost our mother tongue, our mother lost our mother with Jerry, where Sagira Hartman calls a loss of kinship structure taken from Orlando Patterson. This is what makes the affirmative and the negative not viable, because while the affirmative attempts to interrogate the very conditions of colonialism, we are a premeditated conditions of what created the colonization to begin with, which is our first piece of Frank Wilderson evidence that goes considered is probably the reason for why you will have to reject it, because they are an affirmation of anthropological and historical axioms that gives them a subjectivity, that gives them coherence inside of civil society. That's why I said, what about black people in the context of Asian bodies? What about when you go into the makeup store, when you go into the beauty supply? They're too stuck up in understanding race relations to be white versus non-white, while we're saying that race relations is black versus non-black, i.e. the Asian identity, the Latino body in and of itself still has subjected over the black identity. That's why Brooke always asks me, why don't you affirm that Latino shit sometimes? And I say, because Latino people are inherently anti-black. The Mexican body does not want me in the room, because they know that I am the old Bruni, I am the slave baby, I am Dominican, which means that I am mulatto. I am just too different to be coherent and have the subject relations that other non-black Latino bodies have, which is a very preconceived notion. That is why at the end of cross-examination I said, not that you didn't understand the question, but you didn't understand the three-minute cross-examination, because the very race relation and how we understand racism. Let me repeat that how we come to understand racism is fundamentally different, and this is seen through the concession of the Wilderson 10 evidence that makes an argument for why those anthropological feelings that you have about you having a spirit or so on and so forth. I can have a spirit animal if I want to, but it doesn't stop the police from shooting me in the fucking face, because I am just too goddamn different. And now all of those three explanations are linked, are both links, and this adds to the permutation. It makes the permutation not a viable option, because they cannot redress the pain body of the position of the slave body. Listen, at the end of the debate round, you don't have to wonder whether or not you have negative solves for anything. Rather, does the affirmative do anything? They have said time and time again that if it's good for them and it's not a universal policy, then it is okay. That is exactly what the Jared Sexton evidence that Brooke just read at the bottom of the flow explains, and that is why the permutation once again fails, because when we come to the rescue, and I'm going to quote Jared Sexton, when we defend the rights and liberty of the states of the latest state repression, we forfeit this and sideline the fate of black people. Two good examples. First is the immigration discussions that Obama is having right now, where he can forefront a policy action that will inevitably help Latino bodies, but he will sideline the fate of black people in Harlem. What about the black people in Detroit? What happened to Trayvon Martin? Apparently we can't riot against Michael Brown because the government is too stuck on stupid on having a fucking black anger management program. Well, it's okay and dandy for amnesty for Asian, for Latino people, and that is exactly why the permutation doesn't solve. Now, here is the big concession there. Here's the big concession. The concession of the Jared Sexton, the Section 12 evidence solves back to all of their empowerment arguments, as Brooke has said above. Now, here is another reason for why you don't vote on the permutation. Slavery that they did not perform the black thought by the two black debaters in the room, which means that their permutation is only awarding them with the ballot or the political economy, while the performance was rendered by the black or the slave inside of the room. This is Hartman in 2013. Whether we think of it as a radical return to social order orders of the act of sometimes called suicide and self-destruction, which really embrace it as in fact the trajectory of our lives is revived by the flame, the conflict in their articulation has been returned and saw solidarity with the things of solidarity comes from we far from the black bodies that were nation is coherence because we were underbelly there were no relation to the blackness outside of the church of the entitlement the occupation of the captain body but what's most intrinsic is when the way in which not only the slave's perform is the property of white enjoyment, but so this is really key. The slave's own enjoyment of his or her performing that too belongs to white people, and her ability to say that there are permutation is one that functions for the affirmative, ones that only disavows our identity. Now they might make an argument for why they're not white people, but as far as we're concerned, because you gain subjecthood from civil society and are able to reclaim your subject position, you are still relegating yourself over black people, which is why I have said that that race relations is not white over non-white, rather black versus non-black, and that is the distinction between the apt and the negative. You have theorized racism incorrectly.
You are at 7:54.